Hello, hello, hello. This is Misty Magdalena Grace with the new and improved version of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, where we talk about spirituality, psychedelics, plant medicine, microdosing, and really that journey within to finding your best innate wisdom, to your best health, your best wealth through all sorts of inner child healing, trauma release, grief recovery, overcoming addictions, and working with the mind, the body, and spirit. So go ahead, leave a review, subscribe, download. We look forward to your feedback. Thanks for tuning in today. All right, everybody. Hi, Happy New Year. This is Magdalena Grace, and I'm super excited to bring back my beautiful, beloved husband, Emmanuel. I'm going to bring you right in. Just wanted to welcome you guys, as today we're going to talk about a topic that supports my earlier podcast from this week. My first podcast was all about shadow work with my friend, Josh Peters, and my husband and I know a thing or two about shadow work. And so we thought we would define it and share a little bit more about our own personal experiences with it, how it changed our lives, how it shaped us into being more in alignment with our truth, how it helped change our career, our marriage. Oh my gosh, so many things. So Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thanks, Magdalena. Always a pleasure to be a guest on your beautiful podcast. So, getting a chance to talk about some of those topics that are so dear to us, that we believe have shaped the very foundation of who we are, who we are becoming. So shadow work is one of them. So I'm be so happy to talk about it.
Yeah, so if you guys are tuning in, whether it's live or on the replay, we do care to hear from you. So feel free to comment below with questions. That's one of the benefits of tuning in live. And if you're not in live, you just go on to Facebook and join my Healthy and Wealthy and Wise Facebook community. My husband is inside of there. I'm also streaming live on LinkedIn, YouTube. So if you subscribe to my YouTube channel or connect with me on LinkedIn, you will absolutely get notified of these live podcasts in the future. And if you are happen to see this and you have the ability to hit the share button, sharing is caring, because 2024 is going to be a big year. We wanted to bring out this topic because of all of the prognosticators and all of the astrologers and all of the different people that we talk to that are into the spiritual realm, but also very much into the 3D physical realm. They understand that as above, so below, as below, so above. The earth is changing. The world is changing. Whether you believe we're going into what they call the age of Aquarius or whatever you believe, you also know that a lot is happening for us, a lot of war, a lot of strife, a lot of inflation, a lot of issues and things that can be very triggering. And it's happening, we believe, for us so that all of the shadow work that we've probably been resisting for a really long time, what you resist persists, and as within, so without. We've got to come back into our hearts. We've got to heal. You can't heal what you don't feel, and you can't heal what you don't name. And shadow work, for us anyway, more than psychotherapy, has been much more transformational. And we want to first start out by telling you what is our definitions of that. And my husband has an amazing story. I love his definition, so I'm going to let him go first.
Okay. Thanks, Magdalena. Yes, absolutely. I think it's very important that we begin by defining what we mean by shadow work. It could have a different meaning to different people. Our understanding of shadow work is really this inner quest of discovering those parts of our being that we're not so proud of, or we may actually be scared of. And it could be emotions, it could be traumas, and it will manifest differently for different people. But it's like that part of us that we don't really want to go there. Like if we were to make a choice as to, do we really want to go there? Our first response will be, I don't want to talk about that thing. I don't want to remember this event. I don't want to talk about this person. I don't want to talk about this particular incident that happened to me, or that happened to my family, or that happened to my coworkers or somebody I know, right? So the shadow work is really, around those very unpleasant, uneasy emotions and events, circumstances of our lives. And one of the ways I've been helped to understand the importance of going in those places that I just described, that Normally, we will be like, hell no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about this. I want to think about this. Well, during these past few years, I was going through what I call a spiritual awakening. Call it something else, if it's an enlightenment or a deepening of my own self, reconnection with my truer values, call it that if it makes more sense to you. As I was going through that, I had a very beautiful moment with my higher self or my guides or angels, whichever name makes sense to you. Choose what makes you feel comfortable. But I had an encounter with I call my guides as part of a very profound spiritual experience, and they wanted me to understand the place and the purpose of shadow work. And this is how it goes. They said, imagine you're on a beautiful, tall, mountain or a really tall hill somewhere, very high, on a beautiful sunny day, and you look around you. So you're on the top of that elevated location, looking to to the horizon around you. And they asked me the question, how far can you see? And I was like, oh, that's easy. If I'm on top of a mountain, I can see other mountains. For us who live here in San Diego County, we're surrounded by mountains. I can even see the ocean. If I'm high enough and I'm on a tall mountain, I can see the ocean far in the distance. So yeah, on a beautiful sunny day, I can see pretty damn far. And then the guides say, now imagine that you're in the dark of night where there is no moon to be seen. It's a new moon. And the sky is also very clear. There are no clouds or anything, but it's pitch black around you. How far can you see? And my first reaction was, well, it's pitch black. I cannot see really far. At least I cannot even see the mountains around me. Everything is dark. I can't even see the ocean around me. Everything is dark. And then the guides say, look up. How far can you see? And then I put myself in that position of looking up, and I had these stars, constellations, galaxies, small galaxies in that beautiful night sky are visible. During the daytime, you can't see them. There's just too much sunlight to see those things. And those things are so far. This is like the outer reach of the universe, or at least the visible universe from Earth. And it clicked in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, that's why shadow work is needed. So we can identify those things that are hidden in the dark. They are hidden in the far reaches of our minds, of our hearts, of our memories. And the only way we can see them is if we go into the dark, into the shadow, into the darkest of night. And then we start to see those things. And those things I believe were those parts of us that we are not really proud of. We don't want to visit. We don't want to remember, things that are causing us emotional states that are not pleasant, things like fear and shame and guilt, remorse, abandonment. And the guys were like, yes, you get it. Yes. That's why shadow work is important. You have to go into those dark places. It is where you will discover those hidden treasures, truly, that are within you, because those things that are deep, hidden within you are also teachers for you. They happened, how unpleasant, and godly, if you want to call that, as they were, they happen for you. They are teachers, and they're going to help you discover more of your true self. And it was so beautiful for me to have that moment of clarity about the usefulness and the purpose of shadow work. So that's the story. It's a true story that happened, as I said. It's not just a fable. It happened to me during a spiritual journey of sometime in the past 2 years. And since then, I'm holding on to that story to explain shadow work to people. Magdalena, if you're okay, I want to give a quick example, right? So Um, so that was kind of, if you want, like the my mind finally opening up to the possibility and the usefulness of doing shadow work. I have an example very recent of I was doing shadow work. So remember, that story I just told you happened years ago. Does it mean that I'm done doing shadow work? No, I'm still doing shadow work. It started actually a little bit before that, and I was not sure what I was doing. Then that happened. That story happened, and I started understanding what I was doing, what I was supposed to keep doing. And here we are. A few years later, I'm still doing shadow work because that's a very serious business. It's a very serious commitment to oneself. So not long ago, we're talking about, in December, early December of this year, I was doing a session with a therapist that I've found as an amazing person who helps with things like traumas. Because as a light worker and a shaman, I was asked by my higher self and my guides to work on my traumas because it was important for me to do the shadow work related to trauma. So, and at the beginning of the session, I had this shoulder pain that had been plaguing me for the past 3 days or so. I woke up one day with my right shoulder completely paralyzed and so painful. I couldn't move it in too many directions, barely. And I have been plagued by this thing for 3 days. Then I go into that a session with my therapist, and she asked me, how are you doing? I'm like, yeah, things have been okay. We have been working on some of the homework you gave me to do, but I have this damn shoulder that's been killing me for the past 3 days. And the therapist says, okay, let's not worry about the shoulder now. Let's just go through what we're supposed to do during our session. So we go through our session, and, a beautiful, well-trained therapist takes me into revisiting some of the emotions that I had related to some traumas of my childhood. And we did a great work, and it was very profound, very moving. And during that whole time, I was not even thinking about my shoulder. We get to the end of the session, and then she said, oh, we haven't had a chance to really talk about your shoulder. That was at the final 2 minutes of the session. And she says, how's your shoulder doing? And I'm like, oh my God, that thing must be hurt. What? And I could do all the motions. I'm like, whoa, what just happened? That thing was not working before we started our session. I could barely move it. How come now it's gone? The pain, the restriction on the motion, all gone. And I realized, I was like, oh, goodness gracious. That was a body reaction to an emotional thing. It was my body reacting to an emotional state, which I had addressed during those hour and a half that I spent working with my therapist on my trauma, fixed a physical problem. And I realized at that moment, even more than before, not that I didn't know that, but I had here like a tangible example, like something like right there, undeniable connection between traumatic events, emotional traumas, and physical, expressions of it, and how working on one fixes the other almost instantly if you do the right work. So that's an example of the power of shadow work that I wanted to share. And perhaps later in the podcast, I can give you some other examples. So Magdalena, back to you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to do a quick acknowledgement. Lily is here. She's one of our biggest fans. Thank you, Lily, from Minnesota. Do want to acknowledge, if you are tuning in on the live, we do acknowledge you. If you want to share where you're tuning in from, city, state, country, and as always, as it says on the screen right now, please hit the share button if you have, want to invite people on. We'll only be here for about 30 minutes or so today, but of course, I live with you firsthand, and we really doubled down the past 2 years to save our marriage, to save our health, to be, better parents, all of the things, better friends, better all of it. We recognized that shadow work was not something we could escape, because guess what? We'd already been escaping it. To your point, there's a great book, guys, called When the Body Keeps the Score. And so exactly what he's talking about, any little micro traumas that get caught up into your body, from not getting your bottle fast enough when you were a baby, not getting your diaper changed, like those are micro traumas. And keep in mind, it's not the same as a sexual trauma per se. It's not the same as a divorce, but it all adds up. It's the compound effect of decades. And when I share one of my shadows example, I'll even say ancestral. So thousands and thousands of years old, that I chose to come into this body in this lifetime to heal, to get to the root cause. And also another reason why should you care about shadow work is if you want to evolve, if you want to, I guess we'll just say it's kind of a buzzword and some people don't like it, but if you want to be enlightened, in light, if you want more light, which we're going to talk about in our next podcast, Emmanuel is going to help with that because he's a very gifted spiritual teacher and healer around light work. One does not become enlightened by just focusing on the light, just in his example, but by making the darkness conscious. So this is a quote from Carl Jung, one of the probably the forefathers of shadow work. There's other teachers who also have done this kind of work, but Carl Jung is my favorite. So he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, making the dark conscious, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. So a lot of people, even psychotherapists, may not focus on the Jungian philosophy because it's painful. Full disclosure, I had a psychotherapist and a grief counselor when I was going through 2020. After my brother died, my mom died, friends committed suicide. I had a lot of unprocessed grief. And of course, later I discovered trauma. And so the talk therapy only made things worse for me because what happened, I chose when I would feel these emotions, like he was saying, guilt, shame, fear, grief, sadness, abandonment. When people die, you feel abandoned, right? You're never going to see them again, at least not in this plane. So that's a real thing. Guess what? I medicated my medications. I was on medications for my autoimmune disease. I believe that was because I didn't do the shadow work in my 20s to help heal my gut, to help prevent the dis-ease. These symptoms, these diseases, challenges, pain, and suffering, they show up for us to get our attention. But a lot of times I would drink over my feelings. I would drink over the guilt, the shame, the fear. I would go to another business seminar, another self-help personal development thing. But guess what? It was all numbing my mind and my body. And essentially, you could say that's why it's so easy for people to get brainwashed if they're inside a cult or whatever, is because we're not listening to our intuition. We're not listening to our body. And when the body has kept the score, in the case of my husband, his shoulder was hurting. In my case, I had become a binge drinking workaholic because I wasn't willing to look at my shadow, which for me, the big words were guilt, shame, and fear. So really quickly, I can actually tell you two areas, because then I'll turn over to you, Emmanuel, to share your other story. But I had two very, very profound things happen for me. I had a business failure in 2007 where I lost everything. So that brought up the guilt, the shame, and the fear. I had never had, at least consciously, an anxiety attack until I was essentially homeless. And that opened up this whole can of worms of feeling guilt for, quote unquote, being irresponsible, for going through bankruptcy. There was shame around that. And guess what? Fear started to attack my ego, saying, oh no, we don't want that to happen again. So what did I do? I threw myself into busyness, medicating my medications. I got married and became a wife and a mom. Guess what? Not too long after that. So I didn't have any time to process any of that guilt, shame, and fear. So adding the mother wound, I never had my mother in my life. I was taken from her arms literally the day I was born. So there was a ton of abandonment. And not really having a mom, I didn't understand how to be a mom. And same thing, my dad and mom, they divorced when I was 4. So I didn't have this modeling of a mom and a dad and a happy, healthy marriage, right? And so underneath that guilt, shame, and fear, now add in, oh, guess what? You get to be a mom and a wife. I felt like a worthless being. I thought, I can't be a mom. How do I do this? That was my unconscious shadow, not my conscious mind, not at all. Because I was a really, in spite of all that, I was a really positive person. My husband can, attest to that. But guess what? Because I didn't go and do the shadow work, I did some talk therapy. I did quite a bit of it, but it didn't heal the shadow. I didn't make friends with the shadow. I didn't feel it. I didn't name it. And what shadow work has taught us, you can't heal what you don't feel. Sure, you can take a medication for it. That's what the doctors will say. But guess what? That's not shadow work. That's just numbing, placating. You're not doing the heavy lifting of looking at, in my case, the guilt, the fear, the shame, the worthlessness. And it cost me. It cost me a lot of time, a lot of money, all of the time that I threw myself into workaholism, all the time that I threw into drinking and hiding my habit from my husband, from the world, gaining 35 pounds. That's what happened because I didn't embrace the shadow. And so we share this with you because we're hoping that just maybe, if not you, maybe someone you share this with, if someone you know is on a lot of medications, especially pain medications, those like my husband's shoulder example, oh my gosh, if you know someone who's struggling with drinking alcohol too much, emotional eating, even social media scrolling, right? Any kind of numbing or medicating your medications idea. And they think that that's okay. And in moderation, I still drink. I believe drinking is actually okay because part of the shadow work showed me that the source of the alcoholism and the autoimmune disease that ran in my family was actually ancestral. If you want to hear more of that story, come to our webinar on Tuesday. I'll tell you the whole story, but for sake of time, I'll just leave you with that teaser. Guess what? Alcoholism doesn't run in the family. It's the root cause of the trauma, whether it's this lifetime, past lives, or ancestral. Again, no one did the shadow work. I got to be the ancestor that decided to make those changes in this lifetime. And all of those generational things end with me. And in order to do that, it requires shadow work. And then being able to transmute that with guidance, with support. You can't do shadow work alone. My husband and I were great examples. I have a coach. He has a trauma-informed therapist. It's different from a traditional psychotherapist. But to be able to do that work, it takes courage and really going into the unconscious and looking at the darkness, owning it, loving it with compassion. It took us a good 2 years, wouldn't you say, Emmanuel, to really get to the space where now we've fallen in love with our shadow and we really embrace it? Oh, shoot. Are you muted?
Yep, I'm back. Sorry, I had muted myself to make sure that the sound was with you. So yes, Magdalena, what you say is so true. It's so true. And over the past 2 years, shadow work has brought so many blessings my way, your way. And I'm going to share one little simple story. So another one of those interesting spiritual journeys that I had not long ago, actually last year. And there was a particular shadow in my life that I had completely repressed because it happened at a very young age. And here's the shadow that came to me. It was the memory of being sent to boarding school by my parents when I was very, very, very young, like, not even four years old, maybe, or so, at a very young age. And my parents did what they had to do. I have no complaints about what they did. It was what made sense to them. But here's what it did to me. I was living before that in West Africa, in the country of Cote d'Ivoire, and I had grown up with my early years in that same country. My parents were students, and they had to go to France to study as with scholarships and all that. So they left me with my grandmother during those early years of my life, and they came back when I was around 4, and they picked me up and took me to France with them. And because they were still finishing a lot of the beautiful studies and the beginning of careers that they were going through, they put me in a boarding school. So imagine this. You got a 4-year-old who has lived in a different country, different continent, different culture, put on a plane to another country, another continent, different culture, from West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, to Paris, France. And then my grandmother, who had been the person who was the closest to me, stayed behind. And then now I have to learn to live with my two parents because they were not there during my early years. But then what? I don't get to do that because I'm put in a boarding school for an entire school year. Can you imagine the kind of abandonment, emotion, and feelings that created inside me? Not only that, I experienced winter for the very first time in my life in boarding school. In West Africa, it's like Florida. Warm, sunny, rainy, that's it. As a young kid, I experienced winter in a boarding school for the first time. And I had these memories of my hands being so cold and trying to understand how do you deal with this? And of course, in a boarding school, for young men like me, young kids, most of us were very young. It's organized almost like a military school, for real, because they have to, hold the discipline. Imagine little kids, 4 or 5. You know what it is to have a 4 or 5-year-old running around. You can create mayhem if you're not controlled. So that place was like a military school, discipline. And I had to morph myself into this new environment with all the other things that all the other traumas that were going on at that time in my life, leaving my grandmother behind, leaving the country I knew behind, leaving the culture I knew behind, leaving the food I knew behind. Go to boarding school, different food. In France, different than food you get in West Africa. A new program, new schedule of activities, new people. I'm surrounded by white people. I probably was the only Black person in that boarding school. Now, that's the kind of shadow work that we talk about when I said you have to go sometime really deep into those places of your life where trauma happened. And again, it was during one of these spiritual journeys that I was taken back to being in that boarding school. And I had completely repressed the impact of that boarding school on me. I had tried to forget about it. I almost never told even my beloved about it, Magdalena, that I spent my first year in France in a boarding school, whole school year. Only seeing my parents most of the time every weekend. Sometimes they couldn't get me. So I would spend a weekend also in a boarding school. And that created such a deep sense of, I would say abandonment is one of them. Fear, right, of not being acknowledged is another one. My voice, my needs not mattering also is another one. And all these things were part of me. So I would let myself be walked over in many areas of my life because of what happened to me at such a young age, where I had to pretty much close my own needs to survive in a completely new environment. And these things, and I'm not saying I was a bad kid. I actually ended up being a pretty good kid. My parents are very proud of me when they talk about my childhood and the things that I did. The discipline did its thing. It taught me how to be disciplined, how to do my schoolwork, how to be organized with my things, not being messy around with things in the home or my bedroom and all that stuff. I learned all that in boarding school. So it gave me some values, but it also left me with a tremendous shadow deep inside. And it's only in the past this past year that I went after that shadow. And I'm still working on it because it's a very deep one. So here's an example of shadow work live from myself, from Emmanuel. Here you go. Back to you, Magdalena.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and kind of we're starting to wrap it up here, guys, too. So if you are here live, and thank you, Lily, for your kind, sweet words. If anybody who is here live and wants to ask us questions. That is one reason we would stay longer. Otherwise, we are going to start to wrap it up. And just, if you're listening and if you know of someone who's struggling with all of those things that I mentioned, I'm going to add a few other pain points that we personally have experienced. If you're on medications, if you're over drinking, overeating, if you're over numbing, over isolating, if you're not shining your light out in the world, if you're a business owner who's struggling financially, we've also experienced that. If you're afraid to speak your truth, remember I said earlier, I have an autoimmune disease. So I went through a period of not making much money, which was devastating for our family. And through shadow work, I've been able to get back to 5-figure months as a healer. I was so afraid, guys, at the beginning of last year because of past life trauma and shadow work that I'd get burned at the stake for being a healer. There's also that, healers shouldn't make much money because they're healers and they're spiritual and this, that, and the other. I mean, oh my God, all of the limiting beliefs that our unconscious mind are holding from not only this lifetime, but past lifetime, or projected upon us by other people, right? We're we're tribal creatures, right? We're community oriented. And so I oftentimes remind people, you are a sum of the 5 closest people you hang around. So even be careful when you choose mentors, business partners. Oh my gosh, I chose all of the business partners that I could to bring out my wounds, the abandonment, the masculine wound. I don't have enough time. I can talk about the witch wound, all of those, but those were all part of what I believe, my husband and I believe we were called to experience so that we can help. So if you know an empathic entrepreneur who's struggling financially, if you know someone who's got health challenges, this is healthy and wealthy and wise for a reason. We want you to live your best health. We want you to live your best wealth. Again, that's not always money, but whatever that means for you, could be best relationships. My husband and I are humbly honored to say that this is the best in our 15 years of marriage that we just celebrated. This has been the best Christmas, the best anniversary. We have so much more unconditional love for our shadows and our individual selves so that we can be more loving for our children, for each other, for our clients, all of that kind of stuff. So if you are that person who's listening right now, who's like, you know what, I've tried talk therapy, I've tried, all of the things, I've maybe even tried plant medicine, and honestly, guys, plant medicine, you've heard me talking about that now for 2 years, but it actually caused me to get worse before I got better because I didn't understand shadow work in that first year. I was actually in a trauma shadow loop for almost 18 months because no one was really helping me understand the purpose and the point in doing the shadow work, because shadow work transmutes so you have more light. If you have more light, you have more peace, patience, kindness, love. You sleep better. Your central nervous system regulates better. You don't have to spend all this money on pharmaceuticals and the medical model and even the therapy model. You can actually heal your life. You can heal yourself when given the innate tools if you first embrace the shadow so that you can embrace the light and be that bridge and really be the change you want to see in the world. So if any of this resonates, this upcoming Tuesday, Emmanuel and I are doing our next shamanic initiation webinar. And in that webinar, we're going to share even, longer versions of the stories that we shared. But then we're also going to talk about how we can help, what we have learned as we stumbled, fumbled, took a few steps forward, a few steps back to be able to know how to dance with the shadow work, heal the body, the mind, and the spirit in the process of doing that much faster than we did, by the way. We have an 8-week program that we're launching this month to help you go deep without doing it yourself, without making all the mistakes that we did, and helping you then bring forth your light. You shine your light, you're going to make more money. you're going to attract that amazing relationship. You're going to have a healthier outlook. And again, as within, so without, your health will improve. Like my husband's shoulder, like my autoimmune disease numbers have gone way down. My my dosage of prescription meds have gone way down. And as a result, there's more energy and more light in my life. Emmanuel, do you want to add any more closing thoughts about the webinar or just anything else?
Just to reinforce what you just said, really, there is so much real life stories and experiences that Magdalena and myself went through, and we've packaged all that into that particular program that we call the Shamanic Initiation. So, again, Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, please find us. We want to be able to tell you more, share more about our personal journeys, some of the things that we've seen, experienced, and how we started finding ways to overcome and bring all the blessings of those beautiful lives at the end of the day that we've been blessed with.
Thank you, Lily. Yes, so 5 p.m. Pacific. I probably put it on the page just after you asked about it. So the info session is Tuesday, January 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific. I will actually drop it in the comments, also in the show notes if you're listening to this later inside YouTube or on iTunes, but there's a website that I just dropped on YouTube, Lily. I'm not even sure if you can pull it off where you are at, but please, if not for you, who do you know that's struggling? A special kind of like shout out, because we've lost 12 friends to suicide, okay? We believe that, and 90% of them, by the way, were on antidepressants medications. Again, I'm not totally down on the pharmaceutical model. I'm just not up on it. You know what I mean? Because if we all did the shadow work, we would have world peace. I'm just going to say that right now. If we all did our shadow work, we would have world peace. We would all get along. No one's religion would be better than anyone else's. We would care about each other more. We'd have more compassion and empathy and really take better care of each other because we've gotten to the root causes of our own shit. And every one of my friends who committed suicide, most of them had just changed their medications, okay? Or were struggling with a combination of medications and alcohol, and drugs. So they were altered in many different ways and never knew about shadow work. So that's why we're so vocal about it, because we want to save some lives. We want to help other healers and light workers be better healers and light workers by doing their shadow work so that they can help save more lives. So this is a mission that's very near and dear to our heart. And we're looking to partner with more like-minded people who want to help save lives in 2024. So if you're that healer or light worker, especially, please attend our webinar on Tuesday, because the other thing that we have seen is if you're a healer or light worker and you're not doing the shadow work, you can injure yourself. You can injure your clients. You can also not, make a lot of money because you just have an imbalance inside of you, and as within, so without. And I'm speaking about myself, and that's what I've seen on my own path. So we want to help you elevate yourself in 2024 and help you be the happiest, healthiest version of yourself this year, so that you can be of service and help other people and help people get off medications, help people get off of, the hamster wheel of life and looking outside of themselves for their answers, but giving them the ability to heal naturally. And that's our biggest passion. So thank you guys for tuning in. I thank you, Lily, and I see a few more eyeballs on the screen. We can't say thank you enough. Until next time, we'll be back next week sharing more about the opposite of shadow work, which is bringing in the light, and then how do you work with that light safely to live your best life as well. So until then, guys, here's to your best health, your best wealth, your best wisdom. Bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star rating or review, and also please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from this inspirational message. We hope to see you again. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my Facebook community. And if you are looking to manifest your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom within, please go to my website, www.microdosingforhealth.com. Again, www.microdosingforhealth.com, to quiet your mind, get into your heart, heal your